today I'm going to talk about keeping your rats cool in the summer. Now we aim to keep our room around 18 degrees Celsius, and we definitely don't want it to go over 20 because we find that's too hot. So that's what we're aiming for. We find that keeping the curtains or the blinds closed in the heat of the day during the midday period is usually quite a good thing to keep the room a bit cooler and shady. You need to look at things like where you're going to put your rat cage as well. Make sure it's not in direct sunlight, and also away from any electrical equipment that can give off heat or any sort of humming noise. The rats sometimes don't like that. Now we do use fans, and we've got quiet fans rather than one big noisy fan, and we find that the rats aren't bothered by the fans. If they were huge and really noisy, they might not like them. So when you're buying a fan, look for the reviews and get the quietest ones you can. And also you don't have to have the fan on the top setting. What we find is we have the fans on a lower setting, but we have 3 smaller fans in our room currently. You can see we've got in the background there's a medium-sized fan, and then there's a little one there. And we find that having a couple of smaller fans in the room is far more effective at keeping the general room temperature cool than having one big fan. And we don't want to be pointing the fan directly into the rat cage either, but we don't want to blast the poor little rats out of bed. They don't want to become chilled, they want to be comfortable. So we position the fans in opposite corners of the room, pointing in towards the centre of the room, but not directly at the cage. And then we find that the air will start to circulate. We have the fans so they're rotating, and just test how far the actual cold air is extending when you're setting your fans up, and you'll soon work out where's the best place to put them. But that we find that if we can generally cool the whole room down to a reasonable temperature, then everyone is comfortable. Be very important where you actually sit the fans, well away from actual cages. Don't run cables behind cages. Rats can stick their arms and their whole shoulders out of the cage to hook things in. You might not have seen this happen, but rats are very ingenious, and of course, as you know, they love cables. So when your rats come out to play, unplug the fans and put them out of the room away from the rats, and you don't want your rats climbing all over the fans and trying to eat the cables. So fans are a good way, providing they're not noisy and providing you're not blasting the air straight into the cage, but you're circulating the air around the room. To make sure you've got the correct temperature, get yourself a thermometer, one that actually gives a correct reading rather than just says too warm or too cold, because then you'll know exactly what temperature it is. And something that we find absolutely wonderful is the granite slabs that you can buy. This is the chinchilla one. It's completely natural granite. You put the shiny side up, not the matte side, because underneath it's porous and it will absorb urine. But this shiny side has just been polished by a machine till it comes up shiny, so it doesn't have any chemicals or anything like that added to it. It's just natural. That stays lovely and cool on a hot sunny day. And that is a real boon, something you can put into your cage for your rats to chill on. Now, they are now, the chinchilla cooling granite slabs are now between £16 and £20, which is the extortionate price for a tiny slab of granite. So I've looked for alternatives, and what we're going to get is a granite chopping board. They're around about £12, although I have seen some cheaper ones. You don't want one that's too flimsy, you want something that's sturdy. And I've seen one that's around £12, and the good thing about having a chopping board is that it'll be food safe, so it should be safe for your rats as well. And that's the thing to look for. Look for natural granite and food safe, and you should be fine using a chopping board. And the advantage of that is it's twice the size of that little granite slab, so in my cage with 5 rats they'll all be able to fit on there and cool down. And you just need to wipe those with water every day if they get dirty, and they're very easy to look after. Some people do use tiles, and that's fine as long as the tiles haven't been treated with any nasty chemicals or anti-mould type treatments. but especially tiles are likely to crack or get rough edges on them, so you must always check the edges of the tiles or the slabs, make sure they're safe and there's no sharp edges for your rats to catch their little fingers or toes on. And the other thing is the positioning of it. If you're using tiles, and especially granite slabs, they are very, very heavy. Always have them on the base, the floor of your cage, never on shelves or anything. Don't have any bedding underneath them, have them completely flat, and you can have bedding around them, but you don't want any little ledges underneath where rats can get their fingers and toes caught. And so just that's a safety aspect. Cucumber is very cooling, has been proved scientifically to cool people down on a hot day, and rats who don't even normally like cucumber, we find if it's a very hot day, we peel the cucumber, we keep it in the fridge, prepare it just before you're going to use it so it stays nice and moist, and just put some chunks of cucumber in, one for each rat, and let them have a chew on that, and that cools them down nicely. Ceramic bowls are very good for keeping water cold, and we always have water in an open bowl of water as well as drinking water bottles. So I would always say ceramic bowls if you're having an open bowl, and if you've got your rats out at playtime, especially in the hot weather, they really need a little bowl of water to drink out of during their hours playtime. Our rat upstairs, sorry, I'm looking at. Another thing we do is have the bowls of water that the rats can get right inside. This is a ceramic dog bowl here, and we just put some cold water in there, and we put a little splash of water from hot water from the kettle just to take the chill off it. We don't want to make it warm. We're just going to mix it all in, and so it's just cool, so that we don't want the rats to suddenly jump into a really cold bowl of water and have a shock. So it's just nicely cool there. So we're not chilling the rats, we're just cooling them gently. And the same with their water bath there. We prepare all the bath and the toys before the rats come out to play, so they're nowhere near the kettle. And we put cold water in first, and then we mix a little splash of water from the kettle. Mix it all round, make sure there's no hot spots, and just take the chill off the water for them. So you want them to just be comfortable in there, and they just pop in and out of the water and have a little splash, and that's really nice for them. And the other thing that of course is very important is actually your drinking water bottles. Now on a hot day, it's best to have a big size bottle rather than a small one, because the volume of water in there is going to stay cold longer than in a tiny little bottle. But what I don't want you to do, this was a free bottle and I will never use this at all. It's very, very squeezy plastic. This soft plastic is the plastic that's not so safe to use, where they maybe have the chemicals in that can leach out into the water. So that one is just there to show you the size of the bottle, but not the squeezy plastic. Now we're going to get some bigger bottles of this rigid plastic, and see I'm pushing on that. It does move very slightly, but not really. And what that means is you can clean them out with nice hot water from the tap and a bottle brush every day, and they're not going to leach chemicals. But never use boiling water from the kettle, only tap water to clean these, and then rinse them in cold water before you fill them up. And just remember, water bottles need to be replaced every 2 months. So get a nice rigid water bottle. You need 2 bottles for each cage, and it's a good idea to have some spare ones. Now what we do to keep the water nice and cold is we don't freeze it, because as I've said before, if you freeze these bottles, it's not good for them to be exposed to extremes of temperature, and you don't want any chemicals leaching out into your water. So what we do is we've got a big water bottle that came from Amazon with a screw top, and it's BPA free, so it hasn't got any nasty chemicals, so we can give it a good scrub out in hot water and use it in the fridge to store our water. We completely refill it several times a day, so the water is always fresh, and we will use our big screw top jar water bottle to fill up the rats' bottles several times a day. and at the moment we're changing their water every 4 hours, and I know that's not possible if you're out all day. So what I'd suggest is, we did have one of these, but one of the rats hooked it in and ate it. You can get little thermal covers that go over these water bottles that will keep the water cold. It's like having a miniature little sort of cool bag around the bottle. So I would suggest you try and get some of those, and always use cold water from the fridge. Now our rats actually don't like water if it's freezing cold, which is another reason why we don't give them ice at all, as some people do. But we actually have noticed that rats were refusing to drink water where we had the open bowl and we put a cube of ice in. They were refusing to drink it until the ice had melted, and we believe that that possibly some rats are like people with ice cream. It gives them a headache if they have things that are too cold. So that's why we don't use ice, and so we're fortunate that there is someone here to change the water regularly. But definitely look into those little covers that you can get for your water bottles. Always have spare water bottles, because they do break and you do need at least 2 of them up there. Biggest size that you can get. Be prepared to waste a bit of water in the summer to keep your rats comfortable. And I think that's probably... I think that's about everything regarding actually in the home. Now what I was going to mention was, if you have to travel and take your rat to the vet, a lot of my friends use hamster cages where they can only as travel cages, I must emphasise, if they're going to the vet. So if you have like a hamster's cage, you can attach a water bottle to the bars and you can make sure that your rat stays cool. If you have a conventional carrier like this, it's not so easy. We have got a little bottle there, but it's not very successful because it's at the wrong angle and the rats don't drink from it. But that's a leak-proof bottle, but it doesn't really work. So when we took Poppy to the vets, it was a very hot day. So what we did is we put some chunks of the chilled cucumber in the bottom of the cage, for the travel cage, and we take a bag with some more chilled cucumber in a little cool bag for the journey home. And what we had in the bottom, we had a cardboard box that's slightly bigger than the rat carrier, and it only covers this part of the rat carrier, so she's still getting her ventilation. And we had here one of these cold blocks that you can freeze. Now we put that in the freezer overnight before we wanted it. We just got it in a plastic bag to stop the condensation. And then what we do with that is wrap it in a tea towel. Just wrap it round in a tea towel. We put that in the base of the cardboard box, and then we put the rat carrier on top. And we're just going to slide that down. And that, you see, the rat carrier fits very nicely in that box. The rat's still got plenty of ventilation, and let's just say there's a little gap between the carrier and the cool pack, so the rat isn't going to get freezing cold, but that kept her nice and cool in the car. So that is the way that we've worked out to keep our rats cool on car journeys. And always remember, never of course leave your rats sitting in the sun in the car. Never leave them in the car unattended, and make sure they're nice and cool in the car. But that really helps with the rat carrier. Inside the rat carrier we have a layer of Back to Nature and a little bit of safe bed on the top, so she has got something to burrow into. Now if you didn't have one of those cold packs that you can freeze, and I must emphasise you should never put them inside the actual carrier. You don't want, even though they say non-toxic, you don't want your rat biting into that, and you don't want them to get too cold. Got to keep them safe. If you don't have one of those cold packs, if you've got one of these plastic boxes with the clips and the rubber seal, you can get flat ones like sandwich boxes. Fill them up, not right to the top, but about 2/3 of the way up with water, and freeze them. You can wrap those in tea towel, and they make nice little ice packs. So you just tuck them into a little tea towel or whatever, and you've got a little ice pack that you can use, and it won't leak because of the rubber seal. So that's just some things that we've worked out, and I hope you find that useful.